Chapter 1 of Book 8 of Physics by Aristotle, translated by Thomas Taylor. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Geoffrey Edwards. Chapter 1. Whether, however, was motion once generated, not having a subsistence before, and will it again perish, so that nothing will be moved? Or was it neither generated, nor will be corrupted, but always was, and always will be? And is this present with things as something immortal and unceasing, being as it were a certain life to all things which have a natural subsistence? That motion therefore is, all those assert who say anything concerning nature, because they fabricate the world, and all these speculate concerning generation and corruption, which could not subsist unless motion had a being. Those too who assert that there are infinite worlds, and that some of these worlds are generated and others corrupted, these say that motion always is, for it is necessary that the generations and corruptions of them should be accompanied with motion. But such as assert that there is one world, or that it is not always, these admit concerning motion what is conformable to that opinion. If therefore it be possible that once nothing was moved, it is necessary that this must have happened in a twofold respect. For it must either be as Anaxagoras says, viz., that all things subsisting together, and being at rest in an infinite time, intellect produced and separated motion, or as Empedocles says, that things were alternately moved and at rest, being moved indeed when friendship made one from many things, or strife many from one, and at rest in the intervening times. For he says as follows, quote, "As far as one from many was produced, or many to the one their being owed, so far these natures generated were, nor firm eternity in them abides, but so far as for ever they are changed, nor cease at once to exist, for ever they immovable alternately remain." Close quote. For by the words, "so far as they are changed," we must conceive that he means hither and thither. With respect to these things, therefore, we must consider how they subsist. For to perceive the truth respecting them not only contributes to the contemplation concerning nature, but also to the method which pertains to the first principle. But we shall first begin from things which have been before defined by us in the Physics. We say, therefore, that motion is the perfect energy of that which is movable, so far as it is movable. Hence it is necessary that things should be present which are capable of being moved according to each motion. And without the definition of motion, every one must acknowledge it to be necessary that what is able to be moved should be moved according to each motion, as for instance, that what is capable of being changed in quality should be changed in quality, and that what can be locally changed should be borne along. Hence it is necessary that what is capable of being burnt should be prior to that which is burnt, and that which has the power of burning to that which burns. It is necessary, therefore, either that these should have been once generated, there being a time when they were not, or that they should be perpetual. If, however, each of those things which can move and be moved is generated, it is necessary that another mutation and motion should be generated prior to the mutation which is assumed, according to which that is generated which is able to be moved, or to move. But if they always had a prior subsistence, motion not existing, an absurdity will immediately appear to the intelligent. And to those who proceed still further, this will be found to happen by a yet greater necessity. For if, since some things are movable and others motive, there is at any time something which first moves, and something which is first moved, and if at another time there is nothing which moves, but it is at rest, it is necessary that this should have been previously changed. For there was some cause of its rest, since rest is a privation of motion, so that there will be a mutation prior to the first mutation. For some things move according to one motion, but others according to contrary motions. Thus fire heats indeed, but does not refrigerate. But science appears to be one of things contrary. Hence, there also something similar appears, for the cold heats, being turned in a certain respect, and having departed, just as he who possesses scientific knowledge willingly errs, when he improperly uses science. Such things, however, as are able to act and suffer, or to move and to be moved, are not entirely able to effect this. But then only when they subsist in this manner, and are near to each other. Hence, when they approach near, the one moves and the other is moved, and when they are so circumstanced that the one is motive and the other movable. If therefore it was not always moved, it is evident that they were not so affected as that the one could be moved and the other could move. But it was necessary that one of them should be changed. For it is necessary that this should happen in things which have a relative subsistence. Thus, if a thing not having been double is now double, if not both, at least one of them must have been changed. There will therefore be a certain mutation prior to the first, to which may be added, how will there be prior and posterior time not having a subsistence, or how will there be time, motion not existing? But if time is the number of motion, or a certain motion, if time always is, it is necessary that motion also should be perpetual. Concerning time, however, all philosophers except one appear to accord, for they say that it is unbegotten. On this account, Democritus shows that it is impossible for all things to have been generated, because time is unbegotten. But Plato alone generates time, for he says that it was generated together with the universe, and that the universe is generated. If, therefore, it is impossible for time to be, and to be conceived without the now, but the now is a certain middle, possessing at the same time the beginning and the end, the beginning indeed of the future time, and the end of the past, it is necessary that time should always be. For the extremity of the last time which is assumed will be in some now, since nothing can be assumed in time besides the now. So that since the now is both a beginning and an end, it is necessary that time should always be on each side of the now. But if time, it is evident that motion also must necessarily always exist, since time is a certain passion of motion. The same reasoning likewise will prove that motion is incorruptible. For as, if it be admitted that motion was generated, it will happen that there was a certain mutation prior to the first, so here it will happen that there is a mutation posterior to the last. For a thing will not at the same time cease to be movable and to be moved, or to be capable of being burnt and to be burnt. For that may be capable of being burnt, which is not burnt, nor to be motive and to move. But it will be requisite that what is capable of being corrupted should have been corrupted when it is corrupted, and again afterwards that which has the power of corrupting this, for corruption is a certain mutation. If, therefore, these things are impossible, it is evident that motion is perpetual, and not sometimes in existence and sometimes not. For thus to speak rather resembles a fiction than anything else, as also to assert that it is thus naturally adapted, and that it is necessary to consider this as a principle, which Empedocles appears to have asserted, who says that it is necessarily inherent in things that friendship and strife should alternately govern and move, and that they should be at rest in the intermediate time. Perhaps also those who make one principle, as Anaxagoras, would assert the same thing. Nothing, however, among those things which consist from and according to nature is deprived of order, for nature is to all things the cause of order. But the infinite has no ratio to the infinite, and all order is ratio. That anything, however, should have been at rest for an infinite time, and afterwards should have been once moved, and that with respect to this there should be no difference, why it happened now rather than before, and again that it should have no order, this is no longer the work of nature, for that which subsists by nature either subsists simply, and not differently at different times, as fire is naturally carried upwards, and not at one time and at another not, or it has a ratio which is not simple. Hence it is better to say with Empedocles, and any other who may assert the same thing, that the universe is alternately at rest and in motion. For now a thing of this kind possesses a certain order. He, however, who asserts this ought also to assign the cause of what he says, and not adopt any axiom without a reason, nor expect that it should be granted him, but he should either employ induction or demonstration. For the things which Empedocles supposes are not causes, nor is this the essence of friendship or strife, but it is the province of the former to conjoin, and of the latter to separate. If also it is added that they have dominion alternately, it should be shown in what particulars this happens, as for instance, because there is something which unites men, viz., friendship, and enemies avoid each other. For this is also supposed to be in the universe, because it thus appears to be in certain things. His assertion, likewise, that this happens in equal times requires a certain reason, and in short, to think that this is a sufficient principle, viz., that it either always is, or is always generated, this is not right, to which Democritus refers natural causes, because they were thus, and prior to this generated. But he does not think that the principle of eternity should be investigated, in some things speaking rightly, but because he asserts this of all things not rightly. For a triangle has always angles equal to 2 right, but at the same time there is a certain other cause of this perpetuity. Of principles, however, there is no other cause, since they are eternal. That there neither was, therefore, nor will be a time when motion was not, or will not be, has been thus far shown. Chapter 2. But it is not difficult to solve the arguments which oppose what we have said. The following considerations may indeed induce some to think that motion once was, when before it had not any subsistence. First, because no mutation is perpetual, for all mutation is naturally adapted to proceed from something into something, so that it is necessary there should be a boundary of all mutation, viz., the contraries in which it is produced, and that nothing should be moved to infinity. Farther still, we see that a thing may be moved which neither is moved, nor possesses in itself any motion, as in a thing inanimate, which, when neither any part nor the whole of it is moved, but is at rest, is sometimes moved. But it is fit that a thing should either always or never be moved, if motion is not generated, when it had not any subsistence before. A thing of this kind, however, is much more evident in animated natures. For sometimes, when there is no motion in us, but we are at rest, at the same time we are sometimes moved, and the principle of motion is sometimes ingenerated in us, from ourselves, though nothing external moves us. For we do not similarly perceive this in things inanimate, but something else which is external always moves them. But we say that an animal moves itself, so that if at any time the whole is at rest, motion can be produced from itself in the immovable, and not externally. If, therefore, this can be effected in an animal, what should hinder but that it may also happen in the universe? For if it takes place in the microcosm, it may likewise in the great world, and if in the world, also in the infinite, if it be possible for the whole infinite to be moved, and be at rest. Of these arguments, however, the first, that there is not always one and the same motion in number which tends to opposites is rightly asserted. For this perhaps is necessary if the motion of one and the same thing cannot always be one and the same in number. I say, for instance, whether there is one and the same sound of one chord, or always another, when the chord subsists and is moved similarly. At the same time, however, in whatever manner this may take place, nothing hinders but that there may be some motion which is one and the same, because it is continued and eternal. This, however, will be more manifest from what will hereafter follow. But there is no absurdity in admitting that a thing may be moved which was not moved before, if that which moves externally is at one time present, and at another not. But how this can take place must be investigated. I say then, it must take place in such a manner that the same thing may be at one time moved, and at another not, by the same thing which has the power of moving. For he who says this doubts nothing else than why some things are not always at rest, and others in motion. But the third argument may especially appear to be dubious, being that which happens in animated natures, as if motion was ingenerated in these, when it was not inherent before. For that which was before at rest afterwards walks, nothing external moving, as it appears. This, however, is false, for we always see something connascent moved in an animal. The animal itself, however, is not the cause of this motion, but perhaps that which surrounds it. But we say that the animal moves itself not according to every motion, but that which is according to place. Nothing, therefore, hinders, but perhaps it is more necessary that many motions should be generated in the body by that which surrounds it, that some of these should be produced by the dianoetic power or appetite, and that this should move the whole animal. Just as it happens in sleep, for then, no sensitive motion being inherent, though a certain motion is inherent, animals are again excited. These things, however, will be manifest from what follows. Chapter 3. But the beginning of the consideration will be that which was the beginning of the doubt already mentioned, viz., why some things are at one time moved, and at another again at rest. It is necessary, therefore, either that all things should always be at rest, or that all things should always be moved, or that some things should be moved, and others be at rest. And again, of these it is necessary either that those things which are moved should always be moved, and those things which are at rest always be at rest, or that all things should be naturally adapted to be similarly moved, and be at rest, or that which remains, and which is the third thing, is necessary, for it happens that some things are always immovable, that some are always moved, and that others participate of both these, which is what we assert to be the case. For this contains a solution of all the doubts, and is the end to us of this treatise. To assert, therefore, that all things are at rest, and to investigate the reason of this, laying aside sense, is a certain infirmity of the dianoetic power. The doubt likewise is about a certain whole, and not about a part. Nor is it only adverse to the natural philosopher, but likewise to all the sciences, as I may say, and to all opinions, because all of them use motion. Again, as the objections about principles, for instance in mathematical discussions, are of no consequence to the mathematician, and in a similar manner also in other things, so neither is the objection about what is now said of any consequence to the natural philosopher. For the hypothesis with him is that nature is a principle of motion. To assert, however, that all things are moved is nearly false indeed, but is less foreign from this method. For in physics it is supposed that nature is a principle as of motion, so likewise of rest. At the same time, however, motion is a natural thing. Some also assert that it is not true that some things are moved and others not, but that all things are moved, and always, but that this is concealed from our sense. To these, however, though they do not define what the motion is of which they speak, or whether they speak of all motions, it is not difficult to reply. For things can neither be increased nor diminished continually, but there is also a medium. This assertion, however, is similar to that in which it is said that stones are worn away by a drop of water and are divided by plants germinating from them. For it does not follow that if a drop of water rubs off, or carries away a certain portion of the stone, it, prior to this, rubbed off or carried away the half of such a portion in half the time. But as in drawing a ship along, in like manner so many drops move so much of the stone. A part of them, however, does not move so much in any time. Hence that which is taken away is divided indeed into many parts, but no one of them is moved separately, but they are all moved together. It is evident, therefore, that it is not necessary that something should always depart, because the diminution may be divided to infinity, but the whole will some time or other depart. The like also takes place in any kind whatever of alliation. For it does not follow that if that which can be changed in quality may be infinitely divided, on this account alliation also may be divided to infinity, but it is frequently produced collectively, as in the instance of concretion. Farther still, when any one has been ill, it is necessary that there should have been a time when he recovered his health, and that he should not have been changed in the end of the time. It is also necessary that he should have been changed into health, and not into anything else, so that to assert that a thing is continually changed in quality is to doubt about things which are very apparent. For alliation is into that which is contrary, and a stone neither becomes harder nor softer. With respect to lation, it is admirable if a stone is latent which is carried downwards, or which remains on the earth. Again, earth and each of the other elements necessarily remain in their proper places, and are moved from these by violence. If, therefore, some of these are in their proper places, it is necessary that neither should all things be locally moved. That it is impossible, therefore, either that all things should be always moved, or that all things should be always at rest, may be believed from these and other arguments of a similar kind. Neither likewise is it possible that some things should always be at rest, but others always be moved, and that nothing should at one time be at rest, and at another time be moved. But it must be said that this is impossible, as well in things which have been before mentioned, as in these. For we see that the mutations already enumerated take place in the same things. Besides, he who doubts of this opposes the phenomena, for there will neither be increase nor violent motion, unless that which was before at rest is moved contrary to nature. This assertion, therefore, subverts generation and corruption. To be moved, likewise, nearly appears to all men to be nothing else than for something to be generated and corrupted, for it becomes that, or in that, into which it is changed, but not that from which it is changed, or from whence it is corrupted. Hence it is evident that some things are moved, and others are sometimes at rest. But to think fit to assert that all things are sometimes moved and sometimes at rest, this must be conjoined to the reasons above adduced. We must, however, again begin from the things now defined, and from which also we begun before. For either all things are at rest, or all things are moved, or some things are at rest, but others are moved. And if some things are at rest, but others are moved, it is necessary either that all things should sometimes be at rest and sometimes be moved, or that some things should always be at rest and others always be moved, or that some things should sometimes be at rest and sometimes be moved. That it is not possible, therefore, that all things can be at rest has been said before, and we shall also now assert. For if it were in reality so as some say, viz., that being is infinite and immovable, yet this is not apparent to sense, but many beings are moved. If, therefore, there is false opinion, or in short opinion, there is also motion. This is also the case if there is imagination, though at one time it may appear to subsist in this manner, and at another differently. For imagination and opinion appear to be certain motions. To consider, however, about these things, and to investigate a reason in things in which we are better affected than to require a reason, is nothing else than to judge badly of the better and the worse, of that which is credible and of that which is not credible, and of principle and that which is not a principle. In a similar manner, it is impossible that all things should be moved, or that some things should always be moved, and others always be at rest, for one credible argument is sufficient against all these. Since we see some things at one time in motion, and at another at rest. Hence it is evident that it is similarly impossible for all things to be at rest, and for all things to be moved continually, as it is for some things to be always moved, and others to be always at rest. It remains therefore to consider whether all things are of such a kind as to be moved and to be at rest, or whether some things subsist in this manner, but some are always at rest, and some are always moved, for this must be shown by us. Chapter 4. Of things, therefore, which move and are moved, some move and are moved according to accident, but others essentially. According to accident, indeed, such as are inherent in movers, or the things moved, and such as have the relation of a part. But such things move and are moved essentially, as move and are moved, not because they are inherent in that which moves or is moved, nor because a certain part of them moves or is moved. Of those things, however, which are moved essentially, some are moved by themselves, and others by something else, and some by nature, but others by violence, and contrary to nature. For that which is moved by itself is moved by nature, as, for instance, every animal, since an animal is moved by itself. But of such things as contain in themselves the principle of motion, of these we say that they are moved by nature. Hence the whole animal, indeed, itself moves itself by nature, but the body happens to be moved by and contrary to nature, for it is of consequence with what kind of motion it may happen to be moved, and from what element it consists. Of those things also which are moved by something else, some are moved by nature, but others contrary to nature. Contrary to nature, indeed, as terrestrial things when moved upward, and fire downward. Again, the parts of animals are frequently moved contrary to nature on account of positions and modes of motion, and it is especially obvious that a thing which is moved by something, in things which are moved contrary to nature, in consequence of the being moved by something else being evident. But after things which are moved contrary to nature, among such as are moved according to nature, those are more manifest which are moved by themselves, as animals. For this is not immanifest whether they are moved by something, but the obscurity consists in the manner in which it is necessary to distinguish the mover and the thing moved. For it seems that, as in ships and things which have not a natural subsistence, so likewise in animals, that which moves and that which is moved are divided from each other, and that the whole thus moves itself. But it may be especially doubted concerning the remaining member of the last mentioned division. For of things which are moved by another, some we have considered as being moved contrary to nature, but others remain to be opposed because they are moved by nature. And these last are the things which may occasion a doubt by what they are moved, as for instance things light and heavy, for these are moved by violence to opposite places, but to their proper places naturally. The light indeed upward, and the heavy downward. But it is no longer apparent by what they are moved, as it is when they are moved contrary to nature. For it is impossible to say that they are moved by themselves, since this is vital, and the peculiarity of animated natures. They would also be able to stop themselves. I say, for instance, if anything is the cause to itself of walking, it will also be the cause to itself of not walking, so that since it is in the power of fire to tend upward, it is evident that it is also in its power to tend downward. It is also absurd to suppose that they should be moved with one motion only by themselves, if they themselves move themselves. Again, how is it possible that anything continued and connascent can move itself? For so far as it is one and continued, but not by contact, so far it is impassive. So far, however, as they are separated, so far the one is naturally adapted to act, and the other to suffer. Neither, therefore, will any one of these move itself, for they are connascent, nor can this be asserted of anything else which is continued. But it is necessary that in everything that which moves should be divided from that which is moved, as we see in things inanimate, when anything animated moves them. It happens, however, that these are always moved by something, and this will become evident to those who divide causes. What is asserted also may be assumed in motive natures, for some things are motive contrary to their own nature. Thus a lever has not naturally a power of moving a weight, but others are naturally motive. Thus that which is hot in energy is motive of that which is hot in capacity. The like also takes place in other things of a similar kind. Thus, too, that which is movable by nature, which in capacity possesses quality or quantity, or somewhere, when it has such a principle as this in itself, and not according to accident. For the same thing may possess quantity and quality, but the one happens to the other, and is not essentially inherent. Fire, therefore, and earth are moved by something. By violence, indeed, when they are moved contrary to nature, but naturally, when, being in capacity, they are moved to their own energies. Since, however, a subsistence in capacity is multifariously predicated, this is the cause why things of this kind do not appear to be moved by anything, as, for instance, fire upward, and earth downward. But he who learns is in a different way in capacity from him who is scientific, and who now possesses science, and does not theorize. Always, however, when the agent and patient subsist together, that which is in capacity becomes in energy. Thus, he who learns, from being in capacity, becomes something else in capacity. For he who possesses science and does not theorize is in a certain respect scientific in capacity, but not as he was before he learnt. But when he thus subsists, unless something impedes, he energizes and contemplates, or he would be in contradiction and ignorance. These things also, similarly, take place in natural things. For that which is cold is in capacity hot, but when it is changed, it is now fire and burns, unless something prohibits and impedes. The like also happens about the heavy and the light. For that which is light becomes so from the heavy, as for instance air from water, for it was first this in capacity, and now is light, and immediately energizes unless something impedes. But the energy of a light thing is to be somewhere, and to be in the upper region, but it is impeded when it is in a contrary place. This likewise similarly happens in quantity and quality. This also may be investigated, why things light and heavy are moved to their proper places. The cause of this, however, is that they are naturally somewhere, and this is the very being of what is light and heavy. The essence of the former being defined by existing in the upper, and of the latter by existing in the downward region. But things are light and heavy in capacity, multifariously, as we have already observed. For when a thing is water, it is in a certain respect light in capacity, and when it is air, it is still in capacity, because it may happen that, being impeded, it is not in the upward region. But if that which impedes is taken away, then it energizes and always tends upward. In like manner, that which possesses quality changes into a subsistence in energy, For he who possesses science immediately theorizes unless something impedes, and that which possesses quantity is extended unless something prevents. But he who removes that which supports and impedes, in a certain respect moves, and in a certain respect does not, as is the case with him who withdraws a pillar or takes away a stone from a bladder in water. For he moves accidentally, just as a ball, when rebounding, is not moved by the wall, but by him who threw it. It is evident, therefore, that no one of these things moves itself, but possesses the principle of motion, not indeed of moving or acting, but of suffering. But if all movable natures are either moved by nature or contrary to nature, and by violence, and if all things which are moved by violence and contrary to nature are moved by something and by another, and again, if those things which are moved by nature, as well those which are moved by themselves, as those not moved by themselves, as things heavy and light, are moved by something, for they are either moved by that which generates and makes the light and heavy, or by that which removes things that impede and prevent, if this be the case, whatever is moved by something. End of chapter 4 of book 8. Recording in memory of Mitchell Edwards. Chapter 5 of book 8 of Physics by Aristotle. Translated by Thomas Taylor. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Geoffrey Edwards. Chapter 5. This, however, takes place in a twofold respect, for either it is not through that which itself moves, but through something else which moves the mover, or it is through itself, and this is either the first after the last, or it moves through many media. Thus a staff moves a stone, and is moved by a hand, which is moved by a man, but man no longer moves because he is moved by something else. We say, therefore, that both move, as well that which is the last, as that which is the first of the movers. But that is more a mover which is the first, for it moves that which is the last mover, but this does not move the first. And without the first mover indeed, the last will not move, but the first will move without the last. Thus a staff will not move unless a man moves it. If, therefore, it is necessary that everything which is moved should be itself moved by something, it is also necessary that it should either be moved by that which is moved by another, or that it should not be moved by it. And if it is moved by that which is moved by another, it is necessary that there should be some first mover, which is not moved by anything else. But if the first mover is a thing of this kind, it is not necessary that the other likewise should be so. For it is impossible that a thing which moves, and which is itself moved by another, should proceed to infinity, since of infinites there is no first. If, therefore, everything which is moved by something, but that which first moves is indeed moved, yet not by another, it is necessary that it should itself be moved by itself. Again, it is possible also to discuss this affair as follows. Everything which moves something, and through something, for that which moves either moves through itself, or through another. Thus a man moves either through himself, or through a staff, and the wind throws something down, either by itself, or through a stone which it impels. But it is impossible for that which moves to move without that which moves from itself. If, however, a thing moves itself from itself, it is not necessary that there should be something else through which it moves. But if that through which it moves is something different, there is something which moves not from anything else, but from itself, or there will be a procession to infinity. If, therefore, something moves being moved, it is necessary to stop and not proceed to infinity. For if a staff moves in consequence of being moved by a hand, the hand moves the staff. But if through this it moves something else, there is also something else which moves this. Since, however, it always moves something else through something, it is necessary that should be prior which itself moves itself. If, therefore, this is indeed moved, but there is not anything else which moves it, it is necessary that it should move itself. Hence, according to this reasoning, either that which is moved is immediately moved by that which moves itself, or some time or other it will arrive at a thing of this kind. In addition to what has been said, to those who consider, the following particulars also will be found to happen. For if everything which is moved by that which is moved, either this will be inherent in things accidentally, so as for that which is moved to move, yet not because it is itself moved, or it will not be inherent in things from accident, but essentially. In the first place, therefore, if it is inherent accidentally, it is not necessary for that which is moved also to be moved. And if this is admitted, it is evident that it may be possible some time or other that nothing may be moved. For accident is not necessary, but may not exist. If, therefore, we admit that to be which is possible, nothing impossible will happen, but perhaps that which is false. But for motion not to exist is impossible, for it was before demonstrated that it is necessary motion should always exist. And this happens conformably to reason, for it is necessary that there should be three things, viz., that which is moved, that which moves, and that by which it moves. With respect to that which is moved, therefore, it is necessary indeed that it should be moved, but it is not necessary that it should move. But with respect to that by which it moves, it is necessary that it should both move and be moved. For this is co-changed, since it subsists at the same time, and according to the same with that which is moved, as is evident in things which are locally moved. For it is necessary that they should thus touch each other, as far as to a certain thing. But that which moves, so as not to be that by which it moves, is immovable. Since, however, we see that which is last, which indeed may be moved, but does not possess the principle of motion, and since we also see that which is moved indeed, but by another and not by itself, it is reasonable, not to say necessary, that there should be a third thing which moves, being immovable. Hence Anaxagoras also speaks rightly when he says that intellect is impassive and unmingled, because he makes intellect to be the principle of motion. For thus alone can it move, being immovable, and have dominion, being unmingled. If, however, that which moves is not moved according to accident, but from necessity, and if, unless it is moved, it will not move, it is necessary that that which moves, so far as it is moved, should either be so moved as to be moved according to the same or a different species of motion. I say, for instance, either that which heats must also be itself heated, and that which imparts health must also be made healthy, and that which carries must be itself carried, or that which imparts health must be carried, and that which carries must be increased. It is evident, however, that this is impossible, for it is necessary to speak dividing as far as to individuals, just as if something should teach how to geometrize. This same thing should also be taught to geometrize. Or if anything throws, that it should also be thrown according to the same mode of throwing, or not in this manner indeed, but a different thing from a different genus, as, for instance, for that which carries to be increased, but that which increases this to be changed in quality by something else, and for that which causes this to be changed in quality to be moved according to some other motion. But it is necessary to stop, for motions are finite. To say, however, that a reversion again takes place, and that a thing which produces change in quality is carried, is to do the same thing as if any one should immediately say that which carries is carried, and that which teaches is taught. For it is evident that everything which is moved is also moved by a superior mover, and that it is more moved by that which is prior among movers. This, however, is impossible, for it will happen that the teacher will learn, of which two it is necessary that the one should possess, and that the other should not possess, science. Farther still, it will happen, which is still more absurd, that whatever is motive will be movable if everything which is moved by that which is moved, for it will be movable. And this is just as if some one should say that everything which has the power of imparting health is also capable of being made healthy, and that everything which has the power of building may be built, either immediately or through many media. I say, for instance, it is just as if everything which is motive is movable by something else, yet it is not movable with the same motion by which it moves a thing near, but with a different motion, just as if that which has the power of imparting health could learn. This assent, however, will some time or other be terminated in the same form, as we have before observed. One, therefore, of these is impossible, and the other fictitious, for it is absurd that a thing which is capable of producing a change in quality should necessarily be capable of being increased. It is not therefore necessary that a thing which is moved should always be moved by another, which also is itself moved. The procession, therefore, will stop. Hence, that which is first moved will either be moved by that which is at rest, or it will itself move itself. However, though it should be necessary to consider whether that which itself moves itself is the cause and principle of motion, or that which is moved by another, every one should admit the former, for that which is a cause through itself is always prior to that which is a cause through another. Chapter 6. This, therefore, must be considered assuming another beginning. If any thing moves itself, how and after what manner it moves? It is necessary, then, that whatever is moved should be divisible into things perpetually divisible, for this was before demonstrated in the universal discussions concerning nature, viz., that everything which is moved essentially is continued. It is impossible, however, that a thing which moves itself should wholly itself move itself, for the whole would be carried, and would carry according to the same lation, since it is one and an individual in species. It would also be changed in quality, and be the cause of change in quality, so that a man might teach and be at the same time taught, might impart health and be made well, according to the same health. Farther still, it has been shown that a thing which is movable is moved, but this, while it is moved, is in capacity, and not in energy, and that which is in capacity proceeds to energy. But motion is the imperfect entelechia of that which is movable, and that which moves is already in energy. Thus, that which is hot heats, and in short, that which possesses form generates, so that the same thing will be at once and according to the same hot and not hot. The like also will take place in everything else, the mover of which necessarily has the synonymous. Hence, of that which moves itself, one thing moves and the other is moved. But that it is not possible that the same thing can so move itself as that each part should be moved by each, is from these arguments evident. For neither will there be any first mover if each part moves each, since that which is prior is more the cause of a thing being moved, and will more move than that which adheres. For to move is twofold, one kind of mover being that which is moved by something else, and another that which is moved by itself. But that which is more remote from the thing moved is nearer to the principle than that which is between. Again, it is not necessary that the mover should be moved except by itself. According to accident, therefore, the other will reciprocally move. I assume, therefore, that it may happen that it does not move. Hence, one thing will be that which is moved, and another that which moves being immovable. Farther still, it is not necessary that the mover should be in its turn moved, but either it is necessary that something immovable should move, or that itself should be moved by itself, if it is necessary that motion should always exist. Again, with that motion with which it moves, it will also be moved, so that a thing which heats will be heated. However, neither of that which first moves itself will one part, or many parts severally, move themselves. For if the whole should be itself moved by itself, it will either be moved by some one of its parts, or the whole will be moved by the whole. If, therefore, it is moved because some one of its parts is moved by itself, this part will be that which first moves itself, for if it were separated, this would itself move itself, but the whole will no longer move itself. But if the whole is moved by the whole, these parts would move themselves accidentally. Hence, if they do not move themselves necessarily, let it be assumed that they are not moved by themselves. Of the whole, therefore, one part will move, being immovable, but the other will be moved, for thus alone is it possible that anything can be self-motive. Again, if a whole line should move itself, one part of it will move, but the other will be moved. The line A, B, therefore, will be moved by itself, and by A. But since one thing moves, being moved by something else, but another being immovable, and since one thing which is moved also moves, but another does not move anything, it is necessary that a thing which itself moves itself should consist from that which is immovable but moves, and besides this, from that which is moved and does not move from necessity, but just as it may happen. For let A be that which moves indeed, but is immovable, and let B be that which is moved by A, and moves C. But this is moved indeed by B, but does not move anything, for though through many media it may some time or other arrive at C, yet let it arrive through one only. The whole, therefore, A, B, C, itself moves itself. But if I should take away C, A, B will indeed move itself, for A is that which moves, and B is that which is moved. But C will not itself move itself, nor in short will it be moved. Nor will the part B, C move itself without A, for B moves because it is moved by something else, and not because it is moved by any part of itself. Hence A, B will alone itself move itself. It is necessary, therefore, that a thing which itself moves itself should have that which moves being immovable, and that which is moved but does not necessarily move anything. These likewise must either both touch each other, or the one must touch the other. Hence, if that which moves is continued, for it is necessary that the thing moved should be continued, it is evident that the whole will itself move itself, not because some part of it is such as to move itself, but the whole will itself move itself, and will at the same time move and be moved, because there is some part of it which moves and is moved. For the whole does not move, neither is the whole moved, but A indeed moves, and B is alone moved. It is, however, dubious if any one takes away from A, if that which moves but is immovable is continued, or from B, which is moved, whether the remaining part of A will move, or of B will be moved. For if this be the case, A, B will not be that which is first moved by itself, since though something is taken away from A, B, nevertheless that which remains of A, B, will move itself. Or shall we say that nothing prevents both, or one of them, viz., that which is moved, from being divisible in capacity, but indivisible in energy, and that if it were divisible, it would no longer possess the same power? Hence, nothing prevents a thing from being primarily inherent in capacity in things divisible. From these things, therefore, it is evident that the nature which primarily moves is immovable. For whether that which is moved, and is moved by something, immediately stops at the first immovable, or at that which is itself moved indeed, but moves itself and is permanent, in both ways it will happen that the first mover in all things which are moved is immovable. Chapter 7. Since, however, it is necessary that motion should always be, and not fail, it is necessary that there should be something perpetual which first moves, whether there be one or many such natures, and which first moves being immovable. That each of those things, therefore, which are immovable indeed, but move, is perpetual, does not pertain to the present inquiry. But that it is necessary there should be something which is itself always immovable indeed, is void of all external mutation, both simply and according to accident, and is motive of another, will be evident to those who thus consider the affair. But let it happen, if some one is disposed to admit it in certain things, that they will sometimes be, and sometimes not, without generation and corruption. For perhaps it is necessary that if anything without parts at one time is, and at another is not, everything of this kind should at one time be, and at another time not be, without mutation, and that of principles which are immovable indeed but motive, it may also be possible that some of them may at one time be, and at another not, but it is not possible that all should be of this kind. For it is evident that there is a certain cause to things which move themselves, of their existing sometimes and sometimes not. For it is necessary that everything which itself moves itself should have magnitude, if nothing without parts is moved. But there is no necessity that the nature which moves should have magnitude, as is evident from what has been said. Hence, no one of those natures which are indeed immovable, but which do not always exist, is the cause why some things are generated and others corrupted, and this continually. Nor yet any one of those which always indeed move these, but are themselves moved by others. For neither each, nor all of these, is the cause of perpetuity and continuity, since for a thing thus to subsist is perpetual and from necessity, but all these are infinite, and all of them do not subsist at once. It is evident, therefore, that though there should be 10,000 principles which are immovable indeed, but move, and many of those things which move themselves should be corrupted, and others be generated, and this thing, being immovable, should move that, and another thing this, nevertheless there is something which comprehends or contains, and this, besides particulars, which is indeed the cause why some things are, and others are not, and is the cause of continued mutation. And this indeed is the cause of these, but these are the causes of motion to others. If therefore motion is perpetual, the first mover also will be perpetual, if it is one, but if there be many first movers, there will be many perpetual movers. But it is necessary to think that there is rather one than many, and finite rather than infinite movers. For the same thing happening, finite things are rather always to be assumed. Since in things which subsist naturally, it is necessary that the finite, and that which is better, if possible, should rather be inherent. But it is sufficient, though it be one, that the first of things immovable, being perpetual, should be to other things the principle of motion. From this also it is evident that the first mover should be a certain one and perpetual, for it has been demonstrated that it is necessary motion should always exist. And if it always is, it is also necessary that it should be continued. For that which always is continued, but that which is successive is not continued. If too it is continued, it is one, but the motion is one, which is from one mover, and of one thing which is moved. For if another and another thing moves anything, the whole motion is not continued, but successive. Chapter 8. From these arguments some one may believe that there is a certain first immovable nature, and again, if he looks to the principles of motive natures, that there are some things, therefore, which at one time are moved, and at another are at rest, is evident. And from this it becomes manifest that neither are all things moved, nor all things at rest, nor that some things are always at rest, and others are always moved. For things which verge to both these, and possess a power at one time of being moved, and at another of being at rest, afford a demonstration concerning these. Since, however, things of this kind are manifest to all men, and we also wish to show each nature of the two, viz., that some things indeed are always immovable, but others always moved, and since we have proceeded as far as to this, and have established as principles that everything which is moved by something, and that this is either immovable or moved, and is always moved either by itself or by another, we have at length assumed that the principle of things which are moved is that which itself moves itself, and that the principle of all things is that which is immovable. But we see indeed, and evidently, that there are things of such a nature as to move themselves, as the genus of things animated and of animals. These also afford an opinion that motion might happen to be generated, when, in short, it was not, because we see this takes place in animated natures. For these, as it seems, when they have been without motion, are again moved. This, then, it is necessary to assume, that these move themselves according to one motion, and according to this not properly. For the cause is not from the animal, but other natural motions are inherent in animals, according to which they are not moved through themselves, such as augmentation, diminution, and respiration, with which every animal is moved when at rest, and is not moved according to the motion which is produced from itself. But the cause of this is that which contains, and many of the things which enter into the animal. Thus, for instance, food is the cause of some motions, for when it is concocted, animals sleep, and when it is distributed, they awake, and move themselves, the first principle of motion being external. Hence they are not always continually moved by themselves, for to each of the natures which move themselves something else is present, which moves, being itself moved and changed. In all these, however, that which first moves, and is the cause of a thing moving itself, is also moved by itself, but according to accident, for the body changes its place, and therefore that which is in the body, and which moves itself by a lever. From hence it may be believed that if there is anything which ranks among things immovable indeed, but which move and are themselves moved according to accident, it is impossible that it can move with a continued motion, so that if it is necessary that there should be continued motion, it is also necessary that there should be some first nature, which moves being immovable, and this not according to accident. If there ought to be, as we have said, in things, a certain unceasing and immortal motion, and if being ought to abide in itself, and in the same, for the principle remaining, it is also necessary that the universe should remain, since it is in continuity with the principle. It is not, however, the same thing for any being to be moved accidentally by itself and by another. For to be moved by another belongs also to some of the principles in the heavens, viz., to some of those which are moved with many lations, but the other belongs to corruptible natures alone. Chapter 9. If, however, there is anything of such a nature as always to move being immovable, and it is itself perpetual, it is also necessary that the nature which is first moved by this should be perpetual. But this is manifest indeed, because there would not be generation and corruption and mutation in other things, unless something moved being moved. For that which is immovable will always move with the same and with one motion, after the same manner, because it is not always changed with reference to that which is moved. But that which is moved by the immovable, or by that which is now moved, because it is differently affected with respect to things, will not be the cause of the same motion, but through being in contrary places or forms, will cause each of other things to be moved with contrary motions, and at one time to be at rest, and at another to be moved. From what has been said also, that becomes evident of which we doubted in the beginning, viz., why all things were not either moved or at rest, or some things were always moved, and others always at rest, and some things were sometimes moved, and sometimes not. For the cause of this is now manifest, because some things indeed are moved by that which is perpetually immovable, and therefore are always changed, but others are moved by that which is moved and changed, and therefore are themselves necessarily changed. But another thing, as we have observed, is immovable, as being that which remaining simply, and after the same manner, and in the same, produces one simple motion. Chapter 10. By making, however, another beginning, these things will be more apparent. For it must be considered whether it is possible that there can be any continued motion or not, and if it is possible, what it is, and what is the first of motions. For it is evident that if it is necessary motion should always exist, and this is the first and continued motion, the first mover will move according to this motion, which is necessarily one and the same, and continued and the first. But since there are three motions, one according to magnitude, another according to passive quality, and another according to place, which we call lation, it is necessary that lation should be the first, since it is impossible there should be increase unless alliation had a prior subsistence. For that which is increased is partly increased by the similar, and partly by the dissimilar, for the contrary is said to be aliment to the contrary, and everything accedes becoming similar to the similar. It is necessary, therefore, that the mutation into contraries should be alliation. If also a thing is changed in quality, it is necessary there should be that which produces the change in quality, and which makes a thing from being hot in capacity, hot in energy. It is evident, therefore, that the thing which moves does not subsist similarly, but at one time is nearer, and at another more remote from that which is changed in quality. But these cannot subsist without lation. If, therefore, it is necessary that motion should always exist, it is also necessary that lation should always be the first of motions. And if of lations one is prior and another posterior, it is necessary that the first motion should be the first lation. Again, the principle of all passions is condensation and rarefaction. For the heavy and the light, the soft and the hard, the hot and the cold appear to be certain densities and rarities, but condensation and rarefaction are concretion and secretion, according to which generation also and corruption are predicated of essences or substances. It is also necessary that things which grow together, or which are separated, should be changed according to place. The magnitude, likewise, of that which is increased or diminished changes according to place. Further still, hence also, to those who consider the affair, it will be evident that lation is the first motion. For that which is first, as in other things, so likewise in motion, may be predicated multifariously. For that is said to be prior, without which other things will not be, but which can itself exist without others. That also is said to be prior which is first in time, and that which is first in essence. Hence, since it is necessary that motion should exist continually, and either that which is continued, or that which is successive, may exist continually, but rather that which is continued, and it is better to be continued than successive, since likewise we always conceive that what is better exists in nature, if it be possible for it to exist, and it is possible to be continued, which will be afterwards demonstrated, but is now supposed, and it is not possible that this can be anything else than lation. This being the case, it is necessary that lation should be the first motion. For there is no necessity that a thing which is moved according to lation should either be increased or changed in quality, and therefore neither that it should be generated or corrupted. But no one of these could exist unless the continued motion exists, which is produced by the first mover. Farther still, lation also is the first motion in time, for perpetual natures can alone be moved with this motion. In each of those things, however, it may be said, which have generation, it is necessary that lation should be the last motion. For after a thing is generated, it is first necessary that there should be change in quality and increase, but lation is the motion of things which are now perfect. In answer to this, it must be observed that it is necessary something else should be prior, which is moved according to lation, and which is also the cause of generation to generated natures, not being generation itself, as that which generates is prior to that which is generated. But generation may seem to be the first of motions, because it is necessary that a thing should first be generated. This indeed takes place in each of the things which are generated, but it is necessary that something else should be moved prior to things which are generated, itself subsisting without being generated. And it is necessary that there should be something else prior to this. But since it is impossible that generation should be first, for if this were the case, everything that is moved would be corruptible, it is evident that no one of the successive motions can be prior. But I call successive motions increase, afterwards change in quality, diminution, and corruption, for all these are posterior to generation. Hence, if generation is not prior to lation, neither will any other mutation. In short, that which is generated appears to be imperfect and to proceed to the principle, so that what is posterior in generation is prior by nature. Lastly, lation is inherent in all things which are generated. Hence, some vital natures are entirely immovable through the want of an organ, as plants and many genera of animals, but with others motion is present when they are perfect. If lation, therefore, is more inherent in things which have obtained more of nature, this motion also will be the first of the others according to essence, as well for the above reasons as because that which is moved departs the least from essence of all motions in being borne along. For according to this motion alone, nothing of the being of a thing is changed, as of that which is changed in quality, the quality is changed, and of that which is increased and diminished, the quantity. But it is especially manifest that the nature which itself moves itself especially moves properly with local motion. But we say that this is the principle of things which are moved and move, and is first to things that are moved, viz., that which itself moves itself. That lation, therefore, is the first of motions is from these things evident. End of chapter 10 of Book 8. Recording in memory of Mitchell Edwards. Chapter 11 of Book 8 of Physics by Aristotle, translated by Thomas Taylor. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Geoffrey Edwards. Chapter 11. What, however, the first relation is must now be shown, and at the same time that which is now and was before supposed, that there may be a certain continued and perpetual motion, will be evident by the same method. That no one, therefore, of the other motions can be continued is from these things manifest. For all motions and mutations are from opposites into opposites. Thus, for instance, the boundaries to generation and corruption are being and non-being, but the boundaries to change in quality are the contrary passive qualities, and to increase and diminution either magnitude or parvitude, and the perfection and imperfection of magnitude are the boundaries. But contrary motions are those which are into contraries, and that which is not always moved with this motion, but had a prior existence, must necessarily prior to this have been at rest. It is evident, therefore, that the thing which is changed will be at rest in the contrary. The like also takes place in mutations, for corruption and generation, simply assumed, are opposed to that which is simply assumed, and each particular to each. Hence, if it is impossible to be at the same time changed according to contrary mutations, mutation will not be continued, but there will be time between them. For it is of no consequence whether the mutations according to contradiction are contrary or not contrary, if only it is impossible that they can at the same time be present to the same thing. For this is not at all useful to the argument. Nor, if it is not necessary to be at rest in contradiction, neither is mutation contrary to rest. For non-being perhaps is not at rest, but corruption is a motion to non-being, but only if time subsists between. For thus the mutation is not continued. For neither is contrariety useful in things which are prior, but the not being able to exist together at the same time. But it is not proper to be disturbed, because the same thing will be contrary to many, as for instance motion to permanency, and to the motion which is to a contrary. For this alone ought to be assumed, that a contrary motion is, in a certain respect, opposed both to motion and rest, just as the equal and the moderate are opposed to that which surpasses, and to that which is surpassed, and that neither opposite motions nor mutations can subsist together at the same time. Again, in generation and corruption, it may seem to be perfectly absurd, if it is necessary that what is generated should immediately be corrupted, and remain for no time. Hence, from these things, credibility may be obtained in other mutations, for it is natural that the thing should similarly take place in all of them. Chapter 12. But that there may be a certain infinite motion, one and continued, and that this is a circular motion, we shall now assert. For everything which is locally moved is either moved in a circle, or in a right line, or in that which is mixed from both these. Hence, if neither of these motions is continued, neither can that be continued which is composed from both of them. But that a thing which is locally moved in a finite right line cannot be moved continually is manifest, for to do this it must return. But that which returns in a right line is moved with contrary motions, for the motion upward is contrary to the motion downward, according to place, the motion to the anterior to that which is to the posterior part, and the motion to the right hand to that which is to the left. For these are the contrarieties of place. But what the motion is which is one and continued has been before defined, viz., that it is of one thing, and in one time, and in that which has no difference according to form. For there are three things, viz., that which is moved, as man or God, when, as time, and the third thing, that in which the motion is produced, and this is place, or passive quality, or form, or magnitude. But contraries differ in species, and are not one, and the differences of place are those which have been enumerated. But this is an indication that the motion from A to B is contrary to the motion from B to A, that they stop and cause each other to cease, if they are produced at the same time. The like also takes place in a circle. For instance, the motion from A to B is contrary to the motion from A to C, for they will stop each other though they are continued, and there will not be a regression, because contraries corrupt and impede each other. Motion, however, to that which is oblique is not contrary to that which is to the upward place. But it is especially evident that it is impossible for the motion in a right line to be continued, because that which returns must necessarily stop, not only if it is moved in a right line, but also if it is moved upon a circle. For it is not the same thing to be moved in a circle and upon a circle, since that which is moved at one time continues its motion, and at another, when it has arrived at the same thing from which it began to be moved, again returns. But that it is necessary it should stop is not only rendered credible by sense, but also by reason. But the principle is this: for since there are three things, the beginning, middle, and end, the middle compared with each of these is both, and in number indeed it is one, but in definition two. Besides, it is one thing to be in capacity, and another to be in energy. Hence, any point whatever of a right line which is between the extremes is in capacity indeed the middle, but is not in energy, unless it divides the line, and, having stood still, again begins to be moved. But thus that which was the middle becomes the beginning and end, the beginning indeed of the posterior, but the end of the prior motion. I say, for instance, if A, which is locally moved, should stand still at B, and again should be moved to C. But since it is continually moved, the point A can neither have approached to the point B, nor have receded from it, but can only be in the now, and not in any time except in that whole time of which that moment or now is the division. If any one, however, asserts that it has approached and receded, A, which is locally moved, will always stand still. For it is impossible for A to have at the same time approached to B and receded from it. It will therefore be in another and another point of time. Hence that will be time which is in the middle, so that A will rest in B, and in a similar manner it will also rest in the other points, for the same reasoning applies to all of them. But since that which is locally moved, viz., A, uses B as the middle, end and beginning, it is necessary that it should stop, because it makes two things, just as if it should be mentally conceived. But it recedes from the point A, i.e., from the beginning, but accedes to C, when it has finished its motion and stood still. Hence this must be said in answer to the doubt, for it has this doubt. For if the line A is equal to the line F, and A is continually moved from the extremity to C, but at the same time A is in the point B, and D is moved from the extreme line F to G equably, and with the same celerity, with which A is moved, certainly D will arrive at G before A will have arrived at C. For that which was first impelled, and which first departed, must necessarily have arrived the first. A, therefore, did not at the same time accede to B, and recede from it, and hence it arrived later at the end. For if it had receded at the same time, it would not have arrived later, but it is necessary that it should have stood still. It must not therefore be admitted that when A approaches to B, D is at the same time moved from the extreme F. For if A approaches to B, it will also recede, and not at the same time. But it was in a section of time, and not in time. Here, therefore, it is impossible thus to speak, viz., in that which is continued. But in that which returns, it is necessary thus to speak. For if G were moved to D, and again, having receded, was carried downward, certainly it has in this case used D as the beginning and end, viz., one point as two. Hence it is necessary that it should have stood still, and not at the same time have approached to D and receded from D, for at once it would be there, and would not be in the same now. The solution, however, formerly given, is not to be adduced here, for it cannot be said that G is in D in a section of time, and that it has neither approached nor receded, for it is necessary that it should arrive at an end which is in energy, and not in capacity. The point, therefore, which is in the middle is in capacity, but this is in energy, and it is indeed the end downward, but the beginning from above. After the same manner, therefore, there is an end and beginning of motions. Hence it is necessary that that which returns upon a right line should stand still, and therefore it is not possible that there can be a continued perpetual motion upon a right line. After the same manner a reply must be made to those who ask the question of Zeno, and who demand whether it is always necessary to pass through the half, for these say they are infinite, and it is impossible to pass through infinites. Or, as some in a different manner make the same inquiry, who require it to be granted them that together with the half being first moved through, every half also may be numbered as it is generated. Hence, when the movable thing has passed through the whole line, it will happen that an infinite number will be numerated. But this is confessedly impossible. In the first discussions, therefore, concerning motion, we solved this argument through time containing in itself infinites, for there is nothing absurd in admitting that something may pass through infinites in an infinite time. But the infinite is inherent in length and in time in a similar manner. This solution indeed is sufficient in answer to the interrogator, for it was asked whether infinites could be passed through or numerated in a finite time. But this solution is not sufficient so far as pertains to the thing and to truth. For if anyone dismissing length and the interrogation whether infinites can be passed through in a finite time makes these enquiries about time itself, for time has infinite divisions, this solution will be no longer sufficient. But the truth which we mentioned a little before must be asserted. For if anyone divides a continued line into two halves, he uses one point as if it were two, since he makes it both a beginning and end. He also does this who numerates and who divides into halves. But thus dividing, neither a line nor motion will be continued, for continued motion is of that which is continued. And in the continued there are infinite halves, yet not in energy, but in capacity. But if the motion should make them in energy, it will not be continued, but will stand still, which evidently happens to him who numbers the halves. For it is necessary that he should numerate one point as if it were two, for it will be the beginning of one half, and the end of the other, if he does not numerate one continued line, but two halves. Hence, to him who asks whether infinites can be passed through, either in time or in length, we must reply that this is partly possible and partly not. For it is not possible for infinites in energy to be passed through, but it is possible for infinites in capacity. For he who is continually moved passes through infinites accidentally, but simply does not, for it happens to a line that there are infinite halves, but the essence and being are different. It is also evident that unless the point of time by which prior and posterior are divided is always attributed to the posterior, the thing itself being considered, the same thing will be at the same time being and non-being, and when it will be in generation, or becoming to be, will not be in generation. The point, therefore, is common to both the prior and posterior, and is one and the same in number, but is not the same in definition, for it is the beginning of the one and the end of the other. But so far as pertains to the thing, it is always of the posterior passive quality. For let the time be A, B, C, the thing D. This in the time A is white, but in the time B is not white. Hence in C it is white and not white. For in any point of A it would be true to say it is white, if it was white in all this time, and in B not white. But C is in both. It must not therefore be granted that it was white in the whole time, but the last now, or moment, C, must be accepted, and this is now posterior. And if it should become not white, and the white should be corrupted in the whole of A, it is generated or is corrupted in C. Hence it is true to say that it is first white, or not white in that, or when it is generated it will not be, and when it is corrupted it will be, or it is necessary that it should be at the same time white and not white, being and non-being. But if it is necessary that a thing which before was non-being should become being, and when it is becoming to be it is not, if this be the case, time cannot be divided into indivisible times. For if D was becoming to be white in the time A, and at the same time is made white, and is in another indivisible adhering time, i.e. in B, if it was becoming to be in A, but is in B, it is necessary that there should be a certain intermediate generation, so that there was time in which it was generated. For the same reasoning will not apply to those who say there are not indivisible times. But in the last point of the time in which it was becoming to be, it was generated and is, to which point nothing adheres, nor is successive. But if there are indivisible times, they will be successive. It is evident, therefore, that if it was generated in the whole time A, there is not a greater time in which it was becoming to be, and was generated, than that in the whole of which it was alone generated. These, therefore, and such as these, are the arguments which some one may believe in as appropriate. But to those who consider the affair logically, from these arguments also it may appear that this very same thing may happen. For everything which is continually moved, if it is not impeded by anything, was first moved to that to which it arrives by lation. Thus, if it arrives at B, it was also moved to B, and not then only when it was near, but immediately, as soon as it began to be moved. For why now rather than before? The like also takes place in other things, but that which is moved from A to C will again come to A, when it is moved continually. When therefore it was moved from A to C, it was then also moved with the motion from C. Hence it is at the same time moved with contrary motions, for the motions are contrary which are upon a right line. At the same time also it changes from this in which it is not. If, therefore, this is impossible, it is necessary that it should stand still in C, and hence there is not one motion, for the motion which is intercepted by standing still is not one. Farther still, from these things also it is more universally evident concerning all motion. For if everything which is moved with some one of the above-mentioned motions, it will also rest with some one of opposite rests, for there is not any other besides these. But that which is not always moved with this motion, I mean motions which are different in species, and not, if anything, is a part of the whole, it is necessary first to rest with an opposite rest, for rest is the privation of motion. If, therefore, the motions are contrary which are made through a right line, and it is not possible for anything to be moved at the same time with contrary motions, that which is moved from A to C cannot at the same time also be moved from C to A. Since, however, it is not at the same time moved, but is moved with this motion, it is necessary that it should have rested before in C, for this is the rest opposite to the motion from C. From what has been said, therefore, it is evident that the motion is not continued. Besides, this reasoning is more appropriate than what has been before said, for that which is not white is at the same time corrupted and becomes white. If, therefore, the alliation into white and from white is continued, and does not remain for any time, that which is not white will at the same time be corrupted, and become white, and become not white, for there will be the same time of three things. Again, it does not follow that if time is continued, motion also is continued, but it is successive. But how can the same thing be the extreme of contraries, as of whiteness and blackness? The motion, however, which is made upon a periphery is one and continued, for nothing impossible happens. For that which is moved from A is at the same time moved to A, according to the same impetus, for to that to which it comes, to this also it is moved. It is not, however, moved at the same time with contrary or opposite motions, for not every motion which is from this is contrary to that which is to this, or opposite, but that motion is contrary which is made upon a right line. For to this there are contraries according to place, for instance, the motion through a diameter, since this is very much distant. But that motion is opposite which is made through the same length. Hence nothing prevents that which is moved in a periphery from being continually moved, and not failing at any time. For the motion in a circle is from the same to the same, but the motion through a right line is from the same to another. The motion in a circle also is never in the same things, but that in a right line is frequently in the same. Hence, that which always becomes in another and another may be moved continually, but that which is frequently in the same thing may not, for it is necessary to be at the same time moved with opposite motions. Neither, therefore, in a semicircle, nor in any other periphery is it possible to be moved continually, for it is necessary frequently to be moved through the same things, and to be changed with contrary mutations. For it does not conjoin the end with the beginning, but the motion of a circle conjoins these, and is alone perfect. It is also evident from this division that neither can any other motions be continued, for in all of them it happens to be often moved through the same things, as for instance in alliation through intervening media, in the motion of quantity through middle magnitudes, and in a similar manner in generation and corruption. For it is of no consequence whether those things are made few or many in which the mutation takes place, nor whether anything intermediate is added or taken away. For it happens in both ways frequently to be moved through the same things. From hence, therefore, it is evident that neither do those physiologists speak well who say that all sensible natures are always moved. For it is necessary that some of these motions should be moved, and according to these, alliation especially takes place. For they say that all things flow and are diminished, and besides this, they call generation and corruption alliation. But the arguments now employed universally show of all motion that it is not possible to be continually moved with any motion except that which is circular, so that it is not possible to be continually moved either according to alliation or according to increase. Thus much, therefore, has been said by us to prove that there is neither any infinite mutation nor any continued motion except that which is in a circle. Chapter 13. But that circulation is the first of lations is evident. For every lation, as we have before observed, is either in a circle or in a right line, or mixed from both these. It is necessary, however, that those should be prior to these, and the motion in a circle is prior to that which is in a right line. For it is simple and more perfect. For it is not possible for anything to be moved through an infinite right line, since that which is thus infinite does not exist. Nor, if it did, could anything be moved through it, since that which is impossible cannot take place. But to pass through the infinite is impossible, and the motion which is made upon a right line, if it returns, is a composite, and becomes two motions. But if it does not return, is imperfect and corruptible. The perfect, however, is prior by nature, by reason, and by time to the imperfect, and the incorruptible to the corruptible. Farther still, the lation which may be perpetual is prior to that which cannot. Circulation, therefore, may be perpetual, but of other motions neither lation nor any other can be perpetual, for in these there must necessarily be standing still. But if there is standing still, the motion is corrupted. Chapter 14. But it happens reasonably that the motion in a circle is one and continued, and not that which is in a right line. For of the motion which is in a right line, the beginning, middle, and end are bounded, and it contains all these in itself, so that there is whence that which is moved began, and where it will end. For everything rests in boundaries, either from whence or whither it is moved. But these in a circular motion are indefinite. For why is any one of those things which are in a circular motion the boundary rather than the rest? Since each is similarly beginning, middle, and end, so that some things are always and never in the beginning and end. Hence a sphere, in a certain respect, is moved and is at rest, for it occupies the same place. But the reason of this is that all these things happen to the centre. For it is the beginning, middle, and end of magnitude. Hence, since this is external to the circumference, there is not any place where that which is moved can rest, as if it had finished its motion, for it is always carried about the middle, and not to the extremity. On this account the whole, in a certain respect, always remains and rests, and yet is continually moved. But this happens reciprocally, for because circulation is the measure of motions, it is necessary that it should be the first motion, for all things are measured by that which is first, and because it is first, it is the measure of others. Farther still, the motion alone in a circle can be equable, for things which are moved in a right line are moved anomalously from the beginning and to the end, for all things, by how much the farther they are distant from that which is at rest, are moved by so much the swifter. But in a circular motion alone, neither the beginning nor the end are naturally adapted to be in it, but are external. Indeed, that lation according to place is the first of motions is testified by all those who have made mention of motion. For they attribute the principles of it to those things which produce this motion. For separation and concretion are motions according to place. Thus, too, friendship and strife move, for the latter of these separates, and the former congregates. And Anaxagoras says that intellect, which is the first mover, separates. And they also think similarly, who say that there is no such cause as this, but that things are moved through a vacuum. For these also assert that nature is locally moved, since motion through a vacuum is lation, and is, as it were, in place. But they fancy that no other motion is in first natures, but in those things which are composed from these. For they say that composite natures are increased, diminished, and changed in quality in consequence of atomic bodies being congregated and separated. Those also think after the same manner who produce generation and corruption through density or rarity, for they orderly dispose these by concretion and separation. To these also those may be added who make soul the cause of motion. For they say that which itself moves itself is the principle of things which are moved, but animal and everything animated moves itself with local motion. We also say that a thing which is locally moved is alone properly moved. But if it rests indeed in the same place, but is increased or diminished or changed in quality, we say that it is in a certain respect moved, but is not simply moved. That motion therefore always was and will be through the whole of time, what the principle also is of perpetual motion, and farther still, what the first motion is, and what motion can alone be perpetual, and that the first mover is immovable, has been said. Chapter 15. Now, however, we shall assert that the first mover is necessarily without parts, and has no magnitude, those things being first defined which are prior to this assertion. But of these, one is that it is not possible for anything finite to move in an infinite time. For there are three things: that which is moved, that which moves, and the third, that in which it is moved, viz., time. But these are either all of them infinite, or all finite, or some are, for instance, two or one. But let A be that which moves, B that which is moved, and infinite time C. Let D, therefore, move some part of B, and let this part be E. It will not therefore move in a time equal to C, for it moves more in a greater time, so that F is not an infinite time. Thus then, by adding to D, I shall consume A, and by adding to E, I shall consume B. But I shall not consume the time by always taking away the equal, because it is infinite. Hence, the whole force A will move the whole magnitude B in a finite time, which is a part of C. It is not therefore possible that anything can be moved by that which is finite with an infinite motion. Hence it is evident that it is impossible for that which is finite to move in an infinite time, and in short, that it is not possible there can be an infinite power in a finite magnitude, is from these things manifest. For let there be always a greater power which makes the equal in a less time, as for instance a power heating, or sweetening, or throwing, and in short moving. It is necessary, therefore, that from that which is finite indeed, but possesses an infinite power, that which is passive should suffer, and more than from another, for infinite power is greater. Besides, there cannot be any time, for if there is a time A in which an infinite force heats or impels, let the time be A, B, in which some finite force does this. By always adding a greater finite force to this, I shall at length arrive at that which moves in the time A. For by always adding to that which is finite, I shall surpass every finite, and by taking away, I shall in a similar manner diminish. A finite, therefore, will move in an equal time with an infinite magnitude, but this is impossible. Hence, nothing finite can possess an infinite power. Neither, therefore, can there be a finite power in that which is infinite, though there may be a greater power in a less magnitude. Let A, B, therefore, be infinite. Hence, B, C, has a certain power, which in a certain time will move D, viz., in the time E, F. If, therefore, I take the double of B, C, it will move in half the time E, F. For let there be this proportion. Hence it will move in the time F, H. Thus, therefore, always assuming I shall never pass through A, B, but I shall always assume a time less than the given time. The power, therefore, will be infinite, for it surpasses every finite power. But of every finite power it is necessary that the time also should be finite. For if it moves in a certain time, which is so much, a greater power will move in a less, but yet in a definite time, according to conversion of proportion. But every power is infinite, as well as every multitude and magnitude which surpasses every finite power. This also may be demonstrated as follows. Let us assume in a finite magnitude a certain power, the same in genus with that which is in an infinite magnitude, and which measures the power placed in the infinite magnitude. That there cannot therefore be an infinite power in a finite magnitude, nor a finite power in an infinite magnitude, is from these things manifest. Concerning, however, things which are locally moved, it will be well, in the first place, to propose a certain doubt. For if everything which is moved by something, with respect to such things as do not move themselves, how are some of these in a certain respect moved continually? That which moves not touching. As, for instance, things which are thrown. But if he who moves at the same time moves something else, as the air which moves being moved, it is similarly impossible to be moved when the first neither touches nor moves. But all must be at the same time moved, and cease to be moved when the first mover ceases, though he should act like a stone, viz., should move that which moves. It is necessary, however, to assert this, that the first mover causes either such air, or water, or something else of this kind to move, which is naturally adapted to move, and be moved. Yet it does not at the same time cease to move and be moved, but it ceases to be moved when the mover ceases to move. Still, however, it moves, and therefore it moves something else which adheres, and of this there is the same reason. But it ceases when a less power of moving is impressed in that which adheres, and it finally ceases when that which is prior no longer causes it to move, but alone to be moved. It is, however, necessary that these should at the same time cease, viz., that which moves, that which is moved, and the whole motion. This motion, therefore, is ingenerated in those things which may at one time be moved, and at another be at rest, and is not continued, but appears to be so. For it is either of those things which are successive, or of those things which touch each other, since that which moves is not one thing, but many things adhering to each other. Hence a motion of this kind is produced in air, and in water, which some assert to be an antiperistasis. But it is impossible to solve in any other way the subjects of doubt than in that which we have mentioned. But an antiperistasis makes all things to move, and be at the same time moved, and consequently likewise to rest. Now, however, one certain thing appears to be continually moved. By what, therefore? For it is not moved by itself. But since among beings it is necessary there should always be a continued motion, and this is one, and it is necessary that there should be one motion of a certain magnitude, for that which is without magnitude is not moved, and of one thing, and by one thing, for otherwise it will not be continued, but the one will adhere to the other, and be divided. Hence that which moves, if it is one, either moves, being moved, or being immovable. And if indeed it is moved, it will necessarily follow that it will be changed, and will be at the same time moved by something. Hence the progression will stop, and we shall arrive at that which is moved by the immovable. For it is not necessary that this should be at the same time changed, but it will always be able to move something, since that which thus moves is without labor, and this motion is equable, either alone or in the most eminent degree, for the mover has not any mutation whatever. It is likewise necessary that neither should that which is moved by the immovable have any mutation in order that the motion may be similar. But it is necessary that the first mover should either be in the middle or in a circle, for these are principles. Those things also are moved most swiftly which are most near to the mover, and such is the motion of the universe. Hence that which moves is there. It is, however, dubious whether anything which is moved can move continually, but not as that which impels again and again in consequence of being continually successive. For it is requisite either that it should impel, or draw, or do both, or receive something different, viz., one thing from another, as was before observed of things which are thrown. But if being divisible, air or water moves, yet they move as being always moved, and in both ways, it is not possible that the motion can be one, but adhering. Hence that motion alone is continued which is produced by the immovable, for always subsisting similarly, it will also continually subsist similarly with respect to that which is moved. These things, therefore, being determined, it is evident that it is impossible for that which first moves and is immovable to have any magnitude. For if it possessed magnitude, it is necessary that it should either be finite or infinite. But that it is impossible there should be an infinite magnitude has been before demonstrated in the Physics. And that a finite magnitude cannot have an infinite power, and that it is impossible for any thing to be moved in an infinite time by that which is finite, has been just now demonstrated. But the first mover produces a perpetual motion, and in an infinite time. It is evident, therefore, that it is indivisible, without parts, and has no magnitude. End of Book VIII, and end of Physics, by Aristotle, translated by Thomas Taylor, read by Geoffrey Edwards, proof listened by Kayo, meta-coordinated by Carolyn Kaiser. Recording in memory of Mitchell Edwards.